Hello everyone, and welcome to today's NRCA webinar. Today's webinar and all October webinars are sponsored by EagleView. My name is Brad Martz, and I work in the Education Department at NRCA. And our webinar presenter today is Teri Williams Smith, and she will be discussing the big business advantages that exist for small business contractors. Teri Williams Smith is a National Director of Federal and Public Markets and Small Business for Tremco Roofing and Building Maintenance, based out of Beachwood, Ohio. Tremco is a building envelope material and solutions services provider, as many of you may know. The focus of Teri's efforts include Tremco's small business strategic alliances and sustainable approaches to business development. Before I turn it over to Teri, a few housekeeping details before we start. If you have questions for Teri during today's presentation, please type it into the chat box on your control panel. Your GoToWebinar control panel is probably on the right side of your screen is where you should see it. You can enter your question at any time. However, we will save our Q&A time for the end of Teri's presentation. Also, today's webinar is being recorded, and you will receive an email once that recording is posted to our NRCA website, likely early next week, next Monday or so. All right, enough for me. Teri, I will turn it over to you now.
Oh, thank you very much, Brad. And thanks, everyone, for joining us. On the East Coast, we're at our lunch hour, and I'm sure on the West Coast, you're just starting your day. But I think it will be an interesting day for those of you who don't necessarily do business with public markets or commercial, and our small businesses as well as large businesses are interested in trying to expand and identify quality small businesses. So that we can really address this and appreciate the audience we have, Brad, let's conduct a little poll about who's joining us today.
All right, I just launched a poll question that you all should see, so please participate and let us know which of these apply to you: large business, small business, minority-owned, veteran-owned. I'll give you a few seconds to put your answers in. Five, four, three, two, one. All right, you're all too late now. All right, let's look at the results here. Teri, looks like we have 63% of our audience indicates that they're a small business contractor, 25% are minority-owned business contractors, and then 13% are large business contractors.
Terrific. So let's take a look at what we're going to be focusing on today. There's a real competitive advantage to understanding and knowing what the market mandates are that impact our customers. Several of the topics we'll discuss today include the actual small business certifications, and they exist both in the public and private market, and a lot of us don't realize that. Even our commercial customers, Coca-Cola or United Airlines, all have corporate goals for working with small business. We'll also discuss the actual social, economic, and political mandates that drive those customers' decision to use small business goals. Then we'll talk about some of the challenges that exist in obtaining certifications, who qualifies and who doesn't, and how large business can benefit, because they actually can. But they're looking for quality contractors, not just ones that happen to have a certification. You need to have some substance behind it, as in our traditional business. Finally, we'll talk about maximizing the use of those certifications. Sometimes a contractor will obtain a certification and then never use it, or trot it out in front of a customer and say, I have it, but not understand the power behind it. So we'll touch on those issues. Finally, we'll discuss the sustainable issues in public roofing contracts that really impact your ability to enhance and diversify your business capabilities. And many times, small business contractor certifications can provide you with a real conduit into a customer's procurement stream, because there's a way for them to utilize, both because of the sustainable mandates that exist in the country, as well as the fact that you might be a woman-owned or minority-owned company. So let's get started. Socioeconomic development designations. Whew, that's a big fancy word, but all it means is that there's been rules and policies set up to try and level the playing field between small business and large business. And understand that they usually are dedicated to the designations of either your military service for veteran certifications, both state and federal, as well as a class. Perhaps you're a woman, or you're a minority-owned, Asian, African American, Hispanic. So there'll be certain goals that a state, county, or federal government wants to reach to include participation by those contractors. And this is not just in direct prime contracts. Remember that large businesses very often are required to demonstrate that they're doing business with small business as well. And in doing so, they want to identify companies not just because they have a certification, but because they're also a good performer. This can go across all of the construction businesses as well as any other business. We're going to focus on our industry, but certifications for roofers, architects, general contractors, and high-performance building solutions engineering firms. So if you align yourself with those companies, you identify companies that you can work with as well, particularly where you're joining small business and small business, you can actually compete and secure those design, bid, build opportunities in working together and identifying ways to satisfy customers' goals. So why does the customer want or need to procure this way? What's really driving the opportunity? Well, from a commercial standpoint, many of these corporations also do business with the federal government, and as a result, they're required to perform a certain amount of their work utilizing small business contractors in an effort to demonstrate that they are developing business across the country and across the economic spectrum. So what they do in their private corporate lives often impacts their ability to contract or provide services for the federal government, the largest customer, obviously, in this country. This brings to mind what they like to call being a good corporate citizen. So they'll track the way that they implement contracts and what percentage of the performance is being done by certain small businesses, and they'll look at it in terms of what level of performance, which we'll discuss a little later. The reason that many of the public entities have to buy or want to buy in this way is because they're mandated by law. The federal government has particular regulations called the Federal Acquisition Regulations, or FAR. You often hear people call it the FAR. Dictates exactly how and how much of the government's spend must be done with small business. And there are goals in every economic, and social category. Their failure to do so can result in not just the budget impacts, but many times in penalties, whereas their success results in those actual federal agencies receiving recognition and individual employees receiving certain bonuses as a result of having successfully achieved these goals. And construction is one of the areas in which they can achieve large numbers. We all know that a large roofing job on a significant surface can certainly account for a great deal of a particular agency's budget, and its maintenance and upkeep can as well. So if you are well versed in how you are able to deliver to that customer, you'll be able to talk about both your skills as well as your certifications. So what kind of certifications? Where do they come from? How? What length of time? The federal certifications are, as you see here. That 8A is a 9-year a socioeconomic development program, and it has many parameters about who can qualify, and that the time limit is restricted. Whereas a simple small disadvantaged business certification based on your minority status is obviously not going to change if you don't change your cultural status. HubZone and woman-owned business both have the HubZone has a definite end if you no longer qualify. It requires that 35% of your workforce live in a HubZone, not necessarily the HubZone that your company is placed in, which is considered to be a disadvantaged or underutilized business zone. You can identify where these are located in your communities by going to the SBA site, which I'll give you a link for later on, and it identifies where those districts are. So even though your company might be placed in one area, which satisfies the requirement, your employees don't have to live in that same area, but they have to live in a hub zone somewhere in the community that helps qualify you. And they recheck this every 6 months. So it is something that is fluid. It can fluctuate and change, and it's difficult to maintain, and that's why you'll see very few people have that HubZone certification. It gives you an advantage if you do qualify for it because it allows for you to compete with a very limited competition pool. The woman-owned small business certifications from the feds is relatively new in the last 2 years. It's very powerful. It has 2 phases, but it's limited to only 81 NAICS codes. What's a NAICS code? We'll get into detail later, but just know this: the roofing NAICS code, which is the National Industry Classification System, is the North American Industry Classification System, is 238160. 238160 is the NAICS code for roofing. And roofing is one of the 81 that a woman-owned business can qualify to receive a certification. There are certainly other elements that must be provided, but obviously being a woman is one of them. Sorry, fellas. But there is a service-disabled veteran-owned small business certification. It is available only through the Veterans Administration. It requires an actual application and certification of the disability, but the real advantage is that for VA contracts, they are given a primary preference, and a contract must be attempted to be awarded to a SDOBSB first, and if not then to a veteran-owned business. And then the hierarchy of certifications flows down from there. And remember, these certifications are effective to get both prime contracts and subcontracts. And we'll go into a little more detail about why that's so important in just a few minutes. Public market and commercial market certifications are usually issued, as you see on the right, by a group called the National Minority Supplier Development Council, or they're issued directly by the state. If you go to your state's procurement site, or you just Google State of Pennsylvania Economic Development Certifications, it will pop up and you'll know how to register your company. They'll have basic codes, much often that include the basic NAICS code of 238160 for you to register your company to qualify for their program, as well as for fulfillment and opportunities that are restricted only to small business. You see there that the designations are MBE, WBE. You'll hear people refer to it as MEBE-WEBE. This has to do with your minority business and women-owned business enterprise, and that's the state level. The ones on the left are the federals, and the ones on the right are for states. Remember that when a corporation is attempting to identify opportunities and meet their goals, they always talk in terms of Tier 1 and Tier 2. And you can think of that as really prime and subcontractor. They want a Tier 1 contractor who's actually going to be performing the primary work that's contracted. A Tier 2 would be a subcontractor who's performing something lesser, perhaps simply providing dumpsters or removing material, not actually, say, putting the roof on. And that's the difference. A Tier 1 or Tier 2 fulfillment for a commercial entity. Now let's talk about the certifications themselves. There's designations, there's all kinds of qualifications, all kinds of requirements. And I like to liken it to folks who hunt or who fish, or even us, the normal process of getting a driver's license. You need a little bit more than that license itself to go out and drive a car or to hunt deer or to go fishing. Once you got the certification, you really need to understand what you have and how you can use it. If you just have a driver's license, you need a few other things, right? You need a car. You probably need insurance. You need to understand what's the benefit of driving a bus as opposed to a sports car if you are a mother or you're a single guy. So all of those kinds of things are equally important when you determine that you want to get one of these certifications. If you're not understanding how to use it, it's not going to do you any good. You don't just stick your fishing license on the end of the hook and put it in the water. You want to know what kind of fish you're going after, what kind of bait you need to use, what's going to attract them the most. And it's the same thing with your federal and commercial customers. You need to know what's driving the way that they buy things. And if it's the fact that you hold an 8A that gives them an opportunity to buy something from you sole source, particularly construction, 8As can provide an opportunity to procure up to $3.9 million in one contract without a bid. That's why it's an attractive opportunity sometimes for the federal government. Having those certifications are more valuable than just the certification itself. It eases the procurement process and provides an opportunity to satisfy some tier goals for your customer. So you got this certification, now what? A lot of times we don't protect what's really, really valuable to us. And so often it can be taken advantage of. We find ourselves in a position where someone is using us and our certification, and we don't realize it. We think, oh, it's just such a great opportunity. This large business is going to work with me and we're going to get this contract, but you're not really performing any work. Or it's a one-off situation. You really want to develop a long-term relationship with a contractor that you might be working with to develop opportunities. You really don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're being accused of being a pass-through because you're not performing or delivering any of the services. What does that mean, that word in the red? Well, usually when you see red letters, it's pretty scary, isn't it? Well, in this case, it should be, because there's always a risk of being identified in the federal sector as having an affiliation with the large business or another business when you take a set-aside or prime contract from the federal government and you don't perform any work. And this can result in a disqualification, fines, and even criminal action. So you want to be very careful about the relationships that you develop with regards to those certifications. You must use every effort to protect this very valuable asset. You have to understand how to broaden your technical capabilities to deliver to the customer, because a lot of times that's what drives the customer to want to identify quality contractors. And the small roofing company may find the opportunity to work with a large one, enhancing their skills, the ability to understand coatings better as opposed to only doing shingle work, the ability to understand how to do cleaning of roof surfaces by perhaps buying, renting, or leasing one of the top-of-the-line cleaning devices like a roof tech. These are all important to understand, including the rules about discarding of debris. If you can provide that service to a larger roofing company that has a prime contract either with a commercial customer or federal, just imagine where that can take you to the next level. That allows you to be very valuable to them, not just because of your certification, but because of the technical skills you can also deliver. This is really important not to lose sight of. It's not just about getting that certification. So, how is this customer going to want to procure the solution that you've delivered? Because as we already discussed, the least part of our conversation today is really going to be about your technical delivery. Many of you are very highly qualified in what you deliver in terms of your roofing services. There are other seminars that we have available within NRCA that tell you about all the different systems and that kind of thing. But it's once you've sold to the customer, you're going to sell to the customer that solution, that you've got to understand how they're going to buy it. It's one of your primary questions you want to ask right after you've sold them on the system that you can deliver. What we will talk about later today are the sustainable options that enhance your opportunity through your certifications. But right now, we're going to talk about how that customer is going to procure. On the left side at the top, you see the federal summary and the public commercials on the right-hand side. Well, many times they'll put out, excuse me, a procurement opportunity or RFP, just like in our traditional world, about how they're going to purchase the solution. Or they might inquire what's called a sources sought to see who's out there to possibly provide it. So, is it always for a large contractor to be prime or the subcontractor? Can the small business be a prime or the subcontractor? I apologize for that insert. I've tried to turn it off and it won't go off, so we'll just ignore it when it comes up. There's opportunities in all roles, and they can be accomplished many different ways. You can actually team where it's an even playing field. In the world of GSA schedules, if you both have one, the large business and the small business, then you could do what's called a CTA, a contractor teaming agreement. And you don't even have to be in the same business or realms. As long as you both have a schedule, you could team together to deliver a solution to the customer if that's how they like to buy, off a GSA schedule. We'll discuss a little more shortly. You could form a partnership with another small business or with a large business. But remember, partnerships are actual business entities. So you will want to engage some legal counsel to understand the ramifications and impacts on your own business. And again, you always want to avoid the affiliation rules if they're applicable. If a contract is awarded as a set-aside, there are certain performance requirements that each party must fill. You might decide to create a joint venture. These are governed in the federal government by the Small Business Administration, or the SBA. And it's extremely important that you get their approval before you join into a joint venture that might be impacted by the affiliation rules. In recent years, there are new rules about the Minute-Protege joint venture agreement, which is governed by the Small Business Administration. And there are new opportunities that give an exception to the affiliation rules if your joint venture Minute-Protege has been pre-approved by the Small Business Administration. A lot of times, contractors are intimidated by the public market procurement process because it seems like, oh, wow, this is overwhelming. What is she talking about? She's going on and on. Well, no, it's not something you learn overnight, but I would venture to say there's so many more similarities than there are differences in how you go to market in your traditional field than how you go to federal or public market. First thing we do, we identify the customer's needs, right? And if you can satisfy somebody's needs, all you got to do is figure out how they're going to buy it. That's been the recurring theme here. The certifications give you an advantage in that realm. Second is, who's the decision maker? Because we can talk all day long, right? Sometimes to the facility guy, he wants it, but who really is holding those purse strings? Who's really controlling how this is going to be purchased? And does this customer have certain unique purchasing requirements? As we discussed before, many times, both in commercial and federal, you can set yourself apart by addressing that issue and saying, hey, are there certain things you want to meet? Are you meeting your woman-owned or your small business-owned requirements, your meeby-weebies in public? So we have to understand how they're going to buy it. I know it's going to sound a bit redundant to you, but That's really the most important question you can ever ask. And if you have an advantage and can show them, not only do you have the solution for them, but there's going to be an advantage to buying from you, which sets you apart, and it has to do with those certifications or your makeup, really important. It's an important sell for you with a large business, and the large business is looking for quality contractors who can deliver. That creates long-term business. Always remember, it's the color of money. Where did the funding come from? Even in the private arena, sometimes you don't realize it, but some of the dollars are being provided to private universities from federal funds. And if they're getting any, then they have requirements to utilize a certain percentage of small business and minority business enterprises in their major construction procurements. So always ask that question. It may set you apart. It's just really important to be able to speak the customer's language. You got to know how they buy, what their acronyms mean, and there's no shame in asking them. If you don't know, ask that question, because it could make the difference between you being successful in your pursuits into these arenas. So I'm not going to go into detail on this, but suffice it to say, the cartoon in the upper right-hand corner speaks to our reluctance to often get into something we don't know much about. The regulatory jungle, the FAR for federal government business. But let me say this. Recognize that the federal government is one of the biggest consumers in the world. And construction dollars are the largest spent, second only to the Department of Defense. And many times, it's the maintenance of those bases that the money is being spent on in terms of our industry and world. So again, this is an important area and an important customer to make sure that you know how to do business and to do business with them at every opportunity. It might be scary at first, but for you small business guys, you've got to go in there the same way the large businesses do and understand how to market, understand how to be prepared and be prepared to deliver what they need, because they do have an opportunity to set aside a certain percentage of what they buy for small and disadvantaged businesses. And they can set these aside based on those certifications and economic groups. So when they're buying those $6 billion in goods and services, they often put out a source of thought to see if the response will garner them a certain amount of contractors who qualify for a set-aside. How about another poll, Brad?
I think that's a good idea. Let's do that. Which one would you like to do? The one related to set-aside awards, subcontracting plan?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, everyone. You should see that poll now. Have you ever received a contract or subcontract as a result of a set-aside award or subcontracting plan requirement? Yes, no, not sure. Give you a few seconds. Okay, I'll go ahead and close the poll now. All right, Terry, results are 33% of our audience, a third of our audience said yes, they have. 44% said no. 22% said they were not sure.
Okay, terrific. So when a contract is actually set aside, it's designated that the only vendors that can respond must meet the criteria that's set up in the contract. So you'll see an RFP come out and it'll be limited to economically developed, economically disadvantaged women-owned small business, EDWSB. If you are a small business, but you happen to be veteran-owned and you're not a woman, you can't respond to that one. So we know that that set-aside is targeting a certain group. Usually it's a result of, as I indicated before, they've sent out a sources sought first and said, okay, here's the parameters of the job we want to do. It's a metal roof, it's in Texas, and it's, I don't know, 150 squares and 2 different buildings. if you're not an EDOSB, you can't respond. You can respond to the sources sought because they're asking for any small businesses. The rule of two comes into effect. If at least two small businesses of a certain class, woman-owned, 8A, veteran-owned, respond, then they can set that procurement aside for small business as opposed to putting it out full and open. Think of the power of that. This opportunity comes up when you market yourself and explain to that federal customer that you are capable. Many times it's overlooked because it's assumed a lot of times that small businesses aren't capable. For the large business, the opportunity comes in where the set-aside is issued and the small business is looking for someone to work with them that they can team with and utilize both of their past performance to demonstrate their capability to deliver that. So the large business becomes the subcontractor to the small business. Remember, you're going to hear me use all kinds of acronyms, and you'll hear it in these public markets, and you're thinking you're speaking a foreign language, but you're not. It seems more difficult until you become more familiar with it, but it's very straightforward. And there are lists, which I will also give you the link to find out about what those acronyms actually stand for and to find them. But using that language and understanding when those set-asides are available, both for large and small business and the opportunities they present, takes on a whole different life when you examine the new All Small Middle Protege Business Program with the SBA. I'll provide you with links at the end so you can determine whether or not large businesses or you small businesses, this is something you want to explore with a reliable entity to develop and move on. It gives you many advantages to going after contracts. The large business takes on the certifications of the small business. The catch is that the small business must earn at least 41% of the profits on that particular project. There are a lot more details that are involved in it, but it does open opportunities for bids, particularly long-term bids like 5-year IDIQs, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts, which are often let with the DoD facilities, and specifically say in roofing, 5 years to do all their maintenance or to respond to task orders. It can be a powerful thing if you're able to accomplish that with a large business and both experience development and expansion of work that you wouldn't otherwise get. I touched briefly on the GSA schedule. It's a very unique animal. It makes your federal government your most favored nation, which means they must have the best pricing. You would not give discounts any lower than what you give the federal government to anybody else. So it's a unique undertaking and requires definitely that you hire outside consultant to assist in determining that decision on acquiring a GSA schedule. It is not required. Even the GSA doesn't buy construction or roofing off the GSA schedule, but certain other agencies do, particularly sometimes in the DoD arena. But a lot of times it's RFP, and it is about presenting an opportunity for bidding on contracts. So the set-aside limitations here on service contracts, that means it's just a maintenance. That prime contractor, if it's a small business and has been awarded through a set-aside, they've got to provide at least 50% of the cost of the labor. That doesn't mean if that service contract is $1 million, but $500,000 is materials. No, that contractor must perform 50% of the labor, the other $500,000. So at least $250,000 in labor would need to be performed on a service contract. The other category is a lot smaller performance and helps you get into that performance game without taking on too much risk by working with another subcontractor, large contractor, or roofing contractor who doesn't happen to have a certification. General construction contracts, which are usually with the NAICS code 236220, you only have to perform 15% of the labor of a construction contract. Again, remember, that does not include the cost of the materials. And especially construction contracts, those that are set aside for roofing, 238160, 25% of the labor cost of the contract must be performed by that prime small business if it's set aside for that group and with its own employees. Finally, in the set-aside limitations category, large prime subcontracting plans require that large contractor to commit to the performance of at least a certain percentage of each of the minority groups based on their subcontracting plan, which they submit to the customer before. That's where the opportunities come for you, small business, to be able to deliver part of the performance of their contract on anything over $500,000. That says million, but it means 500,000. Okay, so to market. You can look at Fed Biz Ops, which you'll get a link for that later on as well. But the real opportunities are where you're able to market directly to the customer first, just like in your traditional opportunities. You don't simply wait for those forecasts, for those RFPs to come out. You know who your customer is, you go out and you identify them, you make sure they buy what you sell and the way you do it, you make sure the roofs that they have on their property are ones that you can service, and market yourself. That's what the large companies do. If you are waiting until the Fed Biz comes out, a lot of times it may be too late if someone else has gone in and sold them a solution and you can't competitively bid to deliver it. So you want to make sure that you're doing a nice balance of both, looking at the Fed Biz opportunities, but also going and making a call on that customer just as you would in your traditional world. Many times large material manufacturers and large roofers have a group of sales reps who go out and sell to that customer, and teaming or working with them may create an opportunity. In the federal market, they can purchase without any bid up to $2,500, sometimes $3,500 on a credit card. So patch and repair is a good way to start delivering to that customer to make them aware that you are capable of delivering a certain amount of work and opportunity. So always look for the vehicles and how they're buying on the market. There may be existing contract vehicles at a facility already having the contract vehicles that are described down there, IDIQ, MAX, Sabre. Some more of that alphabet soup. I want to wrap things up by talking a little bit about the sustainable opportunities in our industry. My good friend and colleague, Joanne Rodriguez, often describes it as the roof being an unused piece of real estate, and learning how to repurpose it for sustainable technology like energy generation, stormwater management. It increases the opportunities for contractors. How? Well, helping them maintain and clean those rooftops so they are suitable conduits for energy opportunities like solar panels, like water management, the capture and catch, understanding about wind power. All of these things can make you more viable and valuable to the customer. This means also understanding about high-performance building solutions, where you are capable of doing energy audits, air barrier evaluations for interior air quality, particularly with the VA. The next code set aside for environmental consulting and services, especially specialty contractors, is available within the women-owned designations. So be sure to evaluate that and see if there's something that you might qualify that allows you to enter that market and provide a sustainable opportunity and opportunity for your customer that fulfills some of the mandates that they've received. Many of the federal government mandates have to do with specialties about landfill diversion, so that what we're tearing off, we're putting in back in a safe way, or we're reusing or repurposing. These are all important ways for you to become a better public market and commercial customer, both to, commercial contractor, both to your customer who is other contractors as well as facility owners. So let's recap a little bit. We've talked about the primary things and advantages to accessing procurement is understanding what the policy and mandates are and requirements. So delivering quality roofs and building solutions that your special market customers, the way they want to buy it. That's number one. Developing good quality contractor relationships with other contractors creates another opportunity. If you understand what's driving the market, you can control the market and get your piece of the pie. If it's being driven by the fact that veterans are required to fulfill, you need to recognize and engage with a veteran-owned business so that you can access additional opportunities. If you're a veteran and you have yet to receive your veteran certification, I'm going to give you the link that you need to go and check it out at the VA at VIP so that you can qualify. And then you've just got to maximize all the procurement and sustainable mandates that exist. So I think we're pretty much winding down here. There are a couple things I want to show you as we close up. This is a slide that you will receive the links for all the things we've talked about today in terms of getting certifications done, including getting access to business and the small business. I'll show you what one of them looks like. This is the SBA site. This is where you can see they have every kind of learning module that you could possibly want. There's the SBA All-Mentor Protege. You can actually go to the course and watch a featured course, access to business, business opportunities, how to win federal contracts. So the information definitely exists and is there at the SBA in many, many forms. It has all kinds of portals to go to start your, I don't know why that's not working. We did so well. To start your business, continue your business. I mean, there's a lot of details about, surely you really have to understand that your bonding as a roofer has to be intact in order to work in these arenas with the federal government. It's imperative that you have substantial numbers in terms of your single and aggregate in order to be able to compete in this world. Here's the opportunity about the sustainable and biomass contracts. Let's see here. There's one other one to show you. Okay, well, you get the idea, and we certainly will be sending you the links for everything that you need to see. There's the one for the lender pages for the Department of Veterans Affairs, and you can see that it often has regional meetings, tells you how to get the assistance. This is the forecast of the opportunities. You can put in 238160 and it'll show you where they're anticipating doing roofing in the next year. The federal fiscal year just started on October 1st. So I want to be able to at least leave some time for you all to ask questions, and I will open it back up to my colleagues to take that over.
All right, thank you, Teri. We do have some time here for questions. First question that we've had come in comes from John, and he's wondering, are there any mentorship programs to help a MBE, or maybe as you refer to it, business that is unfamiliar with the process? Any mentorship programs to help an MBE business that is unfamiliar with the process?
Absolutely. They are located at what are called PTAC, P-T-A-C centers in every jurisdiction. They're accessed by the SBA, so that same SBA site will be very helpful for you to identify a coach, what they call a small business coach, to assist you in getting your foothold into the certification and understanding how it works and using it.
Thank you, Teri. We do have more time for questions if you have them, so I'll make a few closing comments here, but we do have time, so if you have a question that comes up right now, feel free to type it in still. I will let the audience know that there's a brief survey that will launch at the conclusion of our webinar. It's just 4 questions. If you could take 1 minute to fill that out, that would be great. We value your feedback. I also mentioned earlier, but I'll remind you that you will receive a link to the recording of this presentation by early next week. And also, our next webinar takes place next Wednesday, Our NRCA CEO, Reed Ribble, will discuss how to advance the roofing industry's public policy agenda. Many of you may know that Reed is a former U.S. Congressman, so he'll certainly be shedding some light on that experience and how the roofing industry can engage their own congressmen, etc. So you can register for future webinars just like this one, just like you did for this one, at nrca.net/webinar. At that website, you can also find an archive of all of our past webinars, whether it's business management topics, health and safety, legal, roofing technology, etc., etc. All right, Terry, it looks like those are all the questions we have for today. I have some comments from a few attendees that would like you to follow up with them. I'll send those your way afterwards. But thank you very much for your time and for your presentation. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.